About 3 weeks ago, the African Transformation Movement, the ATM, made a shock political move, removing their long-standing president, Vuyo Zungula, and replacing him with Professor Caesar Nongunga, the head of the 12 Apostles Church in Christ. The party has framed the move, which will see Zungula continue as its parliamentary leader, as a strategic one aimed at growing its support base ahead of the 2026 and 2029 elections. But questions about the move have lingered, not helped by the fact that we have, until now, not had much explanation and engagement from the party top brass. Well, let's change that this afternoon and speak to ATM parliamentary leader Vuyo Zungula. We'll be talking, Vuyo, good afternoon, and thank you for coming through. We'll be talking about your party's position on a number of fronts, right, as the shifting sands of politics continue to do what they do. But it's important that we start with this conversation. Why were you removed?
The party, we discussed in the party, and we felt that there is so much work that needs to be done in Parliament. You'll recall that we've got a bill that we've sponsored. There is a lot of work that we've been pushing in Parliament. Now, once you have a party leader who's also the president of the party, then it takes away sometimes the time that you can devote either in Parliament or growing the party outside of Parliament. That's why if you were to check the participation of party leaders for a party with 3 or 4 seats in Parliament, you find that they rarely put their utmost effort in Parliament because they need to balance the work in Parliament and outside of Parliament. So we felt as a party that given that there's going to be a lot of work that we are going to embark on in Parliament that is driven by the ATM, the bill regulating foreign funded NGOs, the committee that we are seeking to establish, an ad hoc committee that will look into rand manipulation. And then the last one would be all of the constitutional amendments in which we've been spearheading as a party. It won't help for me to be 100% in Parliament and the party does not have someone outside of Parliament that will do the work. So that is why strategically we said, let me focus in Parliament, and Professor Caesar Nongunga focuses on ensuring that the party outside of Parliament is able to function.
But why are you not mentioning the relationship between the party and the 12 Apostles Church? Because by now, I'm sure you know that all of us have seen that video where Professor Nongunga talks to a certain clause that was picked up in the Constitution that in his reading and the reading of others in the church could have posed problems and caused friction, in that from the translation it would have resulted in a situation where in his absence you as leader of the ATM would have been head of the church, something that would have divided the church.
No, not at all. The motivation for the change is purely to deal with the Parliament issues and the program that I need to advance in Parliament. And you'll recall that in the church I'm very junior. I'm very junior in the church. No way closer to the top brass of the church itself. So the focus, as you might have seen, that this current year I've been focusing more in Parliament, and also there's 18 political parties in Parliament, and for you to be able to make an impact competing with 18 different political parties, it requires a lot of effort. So that is why my focus is there.
Let me ask it differently then, Vuyo, so that there's no confusion. When we see that video, what are we to make of it?
You must see a church leader addressing church congregants on the issues concerning the church. Whereas if you look at and read the statement of the party, that is informed by where the decision was taken, because this decision was not taken in a church meeting or with the church top brass. It was taken in a party meeting. Now, that is what we need to communicate, what the party has decided.
But is there or is there no such clause in the constitution of the party that says, in the absence of the 12 Apostles Church in Christ leader, one way or another? I mean, the example he gives was that if he were to pass away, for example, the leader of the ATM automatically becomes the spiritual head of the church. Does that clause exist as a matter of fact?
There is a clause which many people, if they interpret it, it would be interpreted like that. So it's just a matter of interpretation.
All right. And then lastly, on this score, what is it that Professor Nongunga will bring that will lead to the ATM's growth that you've not been able to do in your reading?
No, it's not a matter that there's something I've not been able to do. You'll recall that I started being a president at the age of 31, which was in 2018. It's 2025 now, 7 years later. So any organization needs a new breath of life. That's why many organizations in 5 years, they go to conferences. It was not a given that I was going to be president up until I die, because that is not the nature of the organization, which is the ATM. So Professor Nongunga, because of his wealth of experience when it comes to leading, firstly, the church, which when he took over, it had a few 100,000 members, but now it is in the region of over 5 million members in the country and the other countries. And he's got a very, very good relations with other church leaders, civic movements, traditional leaders. Even yesterday, he was in an event where Inkosi was being coronated. So there's that closeness that he has with the grassroots movement, right, which is Inkosi, community organization and other churches.
All right, let's turn to the other issues that are part of the reason we invited you this afternoon. Just your observations of the moment where we are in terms of the national governing coalition known as the Government of National Unity, and the recent ructions and the DA giving that ultimatum and President Ramaphosa standing firm. What are the implications of that for governance, but also for how you as opposition parties position yourselves, including the so-called progressive caucus?
What's very clear is that the DA, including the other parties in the GNU, they are not really interested about getting the country right, because they make these ultimatums based on what does not work for them. It is not about good governance or principles. For example, this particular issue now, it is a case whereby a deputy minister, which was correctly fired or removed from his job because he went on an overseas trip without the permission of the president, which it should never be accepted. Now, what do they do in return? They make a threat to say, if because this deputy minister was removed, they are not going to vote for the other department votes for the ministers which they claim to be corrupt and so forth. But they've got no issues serving in the government with the very same corrupt ministers in their view. But the only reason why they are voting against those department reports, it is precisely because their own DM was removed. So it speaks nothing about good governance or the principles when it comes to government. That is why we as the opposition parties, we have been pushing this GNU to account on many fronts. We've been ensuring that in the work that we do highlight these inconsistencies. We do indicate to the public when this GNU, like we said when it started, it is not formed because it wants to do what is right by the people of our country. DA on its own said that the only reason why they are getting into the GNU, it is to stop any coalition with the MK and EFF. That shows that their primary objective is to keep the EFF and MK out. It says nothing about advancing the interests of the people. Yeah. So in the nature of that particular configuration of the GNU, it will always happen that good governance and the people will come secondary. What will be the first thing that they will consider, it is how they can position their own organizations in this particular arrangement, and not work in the best interests of the people.
Two questions I have for you have to do with the workings of the so-called progressive caucus. The first one is, are we likely to see a shift within that caucus, in the sense that are we likely to see a tornadoing between the ATM and the MK party? There have been these rumblings that say part of the changes in the leadership, I'm sure you'll have seen it, part of the changes in the leadership have to do with a possibility, not of a merger, I don't know what configuration, but a kind of tornadoing between the two parties. Are we to expect that?
The MK and ATM have got a working relationship, which we explained in a statement that we issued a few months ago. There is not going to be any merger because these two organizations will continue to exist, but they will coexist and work together like we've been working together in Parliament, including the other parties that are part of the Progressive Caucus.
Then my second question is, what's your reading of the state of the Progressive Caucus? Because at least two members of that caucus, the EFF and the MK party, there seems to have been really friction at the very least between the two of them. Can we still talk of a cohesive progressive caucus?
When the progressive caucus was formed, we formed it in Parliament, first and most importantly, to spearhead the work that we do as a collective in Parliament. You'll recall that when there was the budget vote where they wanted to increase the VAT, we, as the Progressive Caucus, we met, we caucused, and when we went to the House, we went there as one solid block. Even this past week, we went there as one solid block. So when it comes to the work that we do in Parliament, it is not affected by the tensions that may exist outside of Parliament.
All right. Let's talk about the national dialogue. I don't believe I've heard you speak up strongly on it. Tell us what your position is. The DA says it's withdrawing from it. So that suggests that at some point, and I put the question to Vile Okamp, that at some point it would seem then they went along with it. And now, you can't withdraw from something you were never a part of. But now they're going to be actively opposing it. What's your position? Is it needed? Is it necessary? And is it worth spending resources? Granted that that figure of 700 million rand is being disputed by the presidency, but is it worth expending significant resources towards it?
It's a waste of time and money, and at the same time, it shows how much this GNU undermines the people of our country, because currently we've got doctors who are working triple shifts simply because in the hospitals and clinics, there's not enough doctors to service the people. We've got problems of our children dying when they are eating fake foods that are sold in some establishment, yet environmental health practitioners are not employed. Now, when it comes to the substance of it, why is there's no need for a national dialogue? Because firstly, the president has been having imbizos for a very long time. Now, the inputs that have been received from the imbizos should be sufficient. And also there's a parliament, which is an institution that is representing the people, because the 18 different political parties in parliament are effectively the voice of the people. Now, at a SONA level, at a department level, all parties, they represent what the people want on various issues. And most importantly, the people have always stated that there's no need for dialogues that will cost money. If the government would enforce the law as it is now, that would be more than enough, because in many things, there's the things that the government is saying they want a view on, they're already covered in legislation. What the country is lacking on is the enforcement of the current laws. And we can't have a case whereby you don't enforce laws and then there are consequences as a result of not enforcing laws. And then you come back and you say you want to hear from the people what are the problems. Because we've got a problem, again, Tula says, of a lying president. Because he went to Joburg a few months ago and he said he can't believe the state of Joburg. From the time he went to Joburg up until now, he's never acted. There's no change in Joburg. So this is just something to make people believe that...
a bomb squad.
No, that thing is not going to do anything. So the president just wants to be seen to be doing something. That is why he's going to be having task teams for this, commission for that, because he believes that when he gathers people around for in one way or the other, it creates the illusion that something is done. Yet, what people want is real change, not talk shops that will make a perception as if something is being done.
Vuyo, let's pause for a moment. I want to bring in one of our listeners who is sitting in Rustenburg, Eliza, listening and watching this conversation and wants to weigh in. Good afternoon, Eliza, please go ahead.
No, good afternoon. Yeah, in fact, I'm sure, I just wanted to comment. I'm not sure whether it's within your topic.
Sure.
But what I wanted to say is that we find it strange that the DA, while having signed the statement of intent within the government of national unity, whatever the case may be, it becomes puzzling that they still think that the ANC can actually get them out of that coalition. So it says to us, in itself, the GNU, it's very, very unstable.
Yeah.
Because if you can't sign a memorandum of intent constitutionally, right, in where we are now in terms of that, I still think that so it be. So I just want to agree to a certain extent that they have problems internally.
All right.
So I just wanted to say that and really indicate that for us, we think there is power struggles, yes. But when we look at the charter, the Freedom Charter itself, there is no way that it can be formed by an institution of fear.
All right.
We have looked black and white people going there as South Africans.
Let's leave it there. Thank you for your call.
We need to look at.
Thank you for your call. That's Eliza in Rustenburg there. Vuyo, just the longevity and sustainability of this government of national unity. And the main conversation has been about each and every time there's been a crisis in that GNU, and I think that's part of the point that Eliza talks to. You see people speculating whether or not it will hold because it's based on that statement of intent. What's your sense? Will it hold? Will it fall apart? What will make it fall apart?
Firstly, the DA will never leave the GNU. Firstly, they're enjoying the benefits. You see how much Steenhuisen has grown, as an individual. But at the same time, you will also understand that when it comes to the other parties that are part of the GNU, those blue lights and being a minister is the main reason why they're keeping, they are staying in the GNU. That is why they will go in public and say they are pro the people. They'll all never do anything that is not in the best interest of the people. But they'll vote for a VAT increase. They'll vote now in the previous budget, a budget that has got a fuel levy increase, which will make poor, South African citizens much more poorer. So the rent-seeking arrangement which is done by these political parties will never make them to actually leave the GNU. The only time I think the GNU will actually collapse, it is only through a change in the ANC leadership, because we know that majority of the parties have a relationship not with the ANC as an organization, but with an individual, which is President Ramaphosa. Otherwise, once President Ramaphosa moves out and, let's say, for example, Paul Mashatile comes in, I don't foresee the DA coming in. That is why even in their poster, when they are detailing the corrupt ministers, they've got a face of the deputy president. So, in my view, if a change in the ANC leadership might make the GNU to collapse, unless the ANC says it is sick and tired of being threatened by the DA.
What's been the effect of these parties that you mentioned participating in the GNU in terms of the strength of the opposition voice? So we're talking about significant players in the past parliament, for example, the likes of your IFP, the UDM, also participating in this arrangement of the government national unity, including also the other parties that were not necessarily there in the 6th parliament, but are significant voices in terms of the opposition. What has that done outside of just the progressive caucus?
We, as the other parties that are in opposition, including your Action SA, ACDP, we've been pushing issues, and the voices of opposition has not been weakened by these parties going there, because the voice of opposition, that's what we're saying when they were forming this GNU. There was this notion to say if a party is not part of the GNU, it's not progressive, or it does not want South Africa to succeed. Yet we've been pushing, making people to understand that having opposition is necessary for a democracy, particularly to hold the government accountable, because you can never expect, for example, the spokesperson of the GNU, in fact, the imbongi of the GNU, Gayton Mackenzie, to actually hold any of the ANC ministers accountable. But what we've seen happening is that from the remaining opposition parties, the GNU is being held accountable. That is why you find that even in the committees, even in the bills that have been proposed, the motions that have been proposed, real work is being done to hold the GNU accountable.
I want to take a call from Joshua in Sanin in a moment, but before I do that, I do need to ask you about Floyd Shivamu and the work that he is doing at the moment. Do you foresee a situation where he, in a way, strengthens the caucus, the progressive caucus, or does what he's doing now stand as a threat to you as the ATM, as one of the voices that are leaning in that direction?
It is not a threat. If you are going to have someone receiving the views from the citizens as to what is to be done. There is no political party that should be against that, because you can't be claiming to be for the people and yet you are against a process to hear the voices of the people. So there's no threat that is going to be coming from Floyd Shivamu. However, we would want to say to all of the progressive political parties, we need to find time and space to actually come together, because this GNU arrangement has clearly shown that without progressive being in government, working together, the country is going to regress, because that is what we are seeing now with the DA being in power. So the onus is on us as progressive to say, how do we work together despite our differences? All
right, let's end it off with that call from Joshua in Zanin. Good afternoon. Short and sharp for me.
Yes, good afternoon, Tulas. Thank you for taking my call. Just a few words. I really support the statement. Even yesterday, when I was listening to the president of DA, but the national dialogue, I think, is simply a waste of time. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of money. If you go back to the state capture, the commission's inquiring about state capture, there was a lot of money that was spent there, about 6 billion. And now we are reading all the news that there's almost 700 million that is going to be spent on national dialogue. I don't know what it is they are going to talk about. Things which they don't know, and I think they already know. They know about these things, and I think your guest in the studio is very correct. There's no way people can sit down and talk about things that already exist as if they have no idea what's going on in this country. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of time and money. I support that statement.
All right, Joshua, thank you for that. That's Joshua in Zanin. Let's end it off with your parting shots then, Vuyo. And I suppose I would want you to relate them to your electoral performance. How do you go from your last electoral performance, which wasn't as impressive as your previous one, and there was a slight dip in your electoral performance? How do you move from there to restoring your past performance and even growing? Because you and I know in opposition, you are either growing or you are dying.
That is why the move was strategic, to have someone like myself to focus really on Parliament, because majority of the people want to see the work being done in that space, because that is where the people vote, that we hold the executive accountable, we propose bills, we propose motions, so that we provide leadership in Parliament, so that people can say that when we're in power or when we're in Parliament, this is what the changes that we can bring. So the move was designed particularly for that purpose, so that there is no time whereby I'm missing from Parliament because I need to do party work, or I'm missing from doing party work because I need to be in Parliament. So this is a very, very strategic move.
All right, Vuyo, thank you for your time and coming through and having this conversation with me. That's the ATM parliamentary leader, Vuyo Zungula.